The servants' auction was where you went when no one else would have you. Not the grand marriage markets where noble daughters preened in silken pearls. Not the courtesan houses where beautiful women learned to weaponize desire. This was the bottom, the gutter, the place where the broken and the shamed stood on wooden platforms and prayed someone would find them useful enough to feed. Lyra Ashwood kept her hood pulled low, her hands clasped tight beneath her cloak. Around her, the other women shifted nervously. A widow with hollow cheeks, a former lady's maid dismissed for theft she swore she did not commit, a young Omega with a swollen belly and no mate to claim her, and Lyra, once the daughter of Lord Corbin Ashwood of Ravenwood, once celebrated across 3 kingdoms for a voice so beautiful it could make grown men weep, once betrothed to a young nobleman who had called her his nightingale, his treasure, his forever. Now she was nothing. The binding around her throat pulsed faintly, a constant reminder of what she had lost. She could still speak technically, but only in whispers. Anything louder, anything that carried the resonance that had once made her voice magical, triggered pain so sharp it stole her breath entirely. Her father had made certain of that. The brand on her forehead burned beneath the hood's shadow. 3 years she had worn this mark. 3 years of being called murderer, seductress, witch who drove men to madness. 3 years of believing it might be true. The auctioneer droned through his list, describing each woman's skills with the enthusiasm of a merchant selling bruised fruit. This one can mend clothing. This one knows herbal remedies. This one is trained in childcare suitable for nursemaid work. He reached Lyra and hesitated, glancing at his notes with obvious discomfort. This one, he said slowly, is literate. Trained in etiquette and noble customs, suitable for household management, or companion work. Companion work, a polite way of saying no one knew what else to do with her. The crowd murmured. A few merchants leaned forward, assessing. One man with small, greedy eyes let his gaze travel down her cloaked form in a way that made her skin crawl. "Remove the hood," someone called out. "Let us see her face." Lyra's pulse spiked. Her face was not the problem, it was her forehead. The brand burned there 3 years ago, marking her as a voice witch whose magic had been bound for crimes against the kingdom. If they saw it, they would know exactly who she was, what she had been accused of. And no one would hire a woman suspected of seducing a man to his death. "I said remove it," the merchant with greedy eyes insisted. He stepped closer to the platform. "I will not buy goods I cannot inspect." The auctioneer shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, the woman has requested. I do not care what she requested." His hand reached for her hood. Then the doors exploded open. Not literally, but the force of the presence that swept through them might as well have been a physical blow. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Even the merchant stumbled backward, his hand falling away from Lyra as if burned. An alpha. No, not just an alpha. The Alpha King of Stormhaven. Lyra felt him before she saw him. The dominance rolled through the auction hall like a winter storm, pressing against her chest, making it difficult to breathe. This was not ordinary alpha power. This was something ancient, something pure, the kind of bloodline that existed more in legend than in living flesh. King Theron of Stormhaven walked into the hall as if he owned it, which she supposed he did. He was tall. That was her first coherent thought. Taller than any man present, broad-shouldered, beneath a coat of midnight black, his dark hair swept back from a face that looked carved from pale marble. High cheekbones, a jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and eyes the color of a frozen lake, gray and clear and utterly, completely empty. The whispers started immediately. The king here? Impossible. Why would he come to a servant's auction? Perhaps he needs maids for the palace. The king does not personally hire maids. Theron ignored them all. His gaze swept across the platform, passing over each woman with no more interest than if they were furniture. The widow, the maid, the pregnant Omega. Then his eyes stopped on Lyra. She felt the weight of that gaze like a physical touch, sharp, penetrating, seeing straight through the heavy fabric of her hood to something beneath. The silence stretched thick and suffocating. Then, with a voice as cold and certain as a winter execution, the Alpha King spoke. "That one, I will take her." The hall erupted. "Your Majesty, surely you cannot mean she has not even shown her face. There are far better candidates. If you would only, I said, I will take her." Theron's voice did not rise. It did not need to. The words cut through the chaos like a blade through silk, and every protest died mid-breath. He was already walking toward the platform, the crowd parting before him like water before the prow of a ship. Lyra stood frozen, unable to move, unable to think. Why her? She was hooded, silent, visibly damaged goods. There were beautiful women in this room, talented women. Women who could speak above a whisper and did not carry the brand of a bound witch on their foreheads. Why would a king who could have anyone choose the one woman hiding everything? Theron stopped directly in front of her. Up close, she could see the details the distance had hidden, a small scar at the corner of his left eye, the faint shadows beneath his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, and that cold, cold gaze that revealed absolutely nothing. "You will come with me," he said. It was not a question. Lyra's voice emerged as barely a breath. "Why me?" A shadow passed behind those frozen eyes, not warmth, not interest, something else entirely. "Because you are exactly what I need." He turned and walked away, clearly expecting her to follow. And despite every instinct screaming that this was a trap, that kings did not choose hooded women from servants' auctions without reason, that she was walking straight into danger, she could not begin to understand. Lyra followed. Because whatever waited for her with the Alpha King could not possibly be worse than what waited for her without him. Or so she desperately hoped. The palace of Stormhaven rose against the evening sky like a fortress of ice and stone. Lyra pressed her hands together beneath her cloak, trying to stop them from shaking as the carriage rolled through gates guarded by soldiers in silver armor. She had grown up in a noble house. She had attended royal functions, danced in grand ballrooms, dined with princes and foreign dignitaries. But this was different. This was the seat of the most powerful Alpha King in 5 kingdoms, a man whose bloodline stretched back to the first pack, a man rumored to be so cold that even his own advisors feared to meet his eyes. And he had chosen her for reasons she could not begin to fathom. The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door and offered his hand with a bow so deep it bordered on reverence. "My lady, His Majesty awaits you in the study." "My lady," as if she were still someone worthy of the title. Lyra took his hand and stepped down onto smooth flagstones. The palace loomed above her windows, glowing with warm light that seemed at odds with everything she knew about the king who ruled within. She was escorted through corridors that seemed endless. Marble floors, tapestries depicting ancient hunts and battles. Servants who bowed as she passed, their expressions curious but not cruel. No one sneered at her, no one whispered behind their hands. It was so different from the 3 years she had spent in her father's house, treated as a prisoner in all but name, that she felt almost dizzy. The guard stopped before a heavy oak door and knocked twice. "Enter." The voice from within was the same as before. Cold, controlled, empty of anything resembling warmth. The door swung open and Lyra stepped inside. The study was smaller than she expected. Shelves lined with books, a massive desk covered in maps and documents, a fire burning in the hearth despite the mild autumn evening. And standing beside the window, his back to her, was King Theron. He did not turn immediately. Lyra had the sense he was composing himself, preparing, though, for what she could not imagine. When he finally faced her, his expression revealed nothing. "Remove your hood." Lyra inhaled sharply. "Your Majesty, I have already purchased your contract. Whatever you are hiding, it is now my concern, not yours." His tone brooked no argument. "Remove it." Her hands shook as she reached up. This was it. The moment he saw the brand, he would know. He would realize what he had bought. And then she pushed the hood back. Cool air touched her face. Her dark hair tumbled free around her shoulders. And there, stark against the pale skin of her forehead, was the cross-shaped scar, the mark of a bound witch. She waited for the disgust, the horror, the immediate summons of guards to drag her away. But Theron's expression did not change. He studied her face for a long moment, the brand, her eyes, her lips. Then he nodded once, as if confirming something he had already suspected. "Good?" he said simply. Lyra stared at him. "Good, I knew what you were before I chose you." He moved toward his desk, gesturing for her to sit in the chair across from it. A voice which, bound 3 years ago for allegedly seducing Lord Brennan Vale to madness and death, daughter of Lord Corbin Ashwood of Ravenwood, once considered the most enchanting voice in the Western Kingdoms. Every word was a blade. Lyra sank into the chair, her legs no longer trustworthy. "If you knew," she whispered, "why choose me?" Theron sat across from her, his movements precise, economical. "Because I do not need your voice, Lady Lyra. I need your knowledge." "My knowledge? You were trained from childhood in the art of captivation. Not just through magic, but through words, gestures, the subtle mechanics of attraction." His pale eyes fixed on hers. "You know how to make someone want you, how to make them feel desired in return." Lyra's brow furrowed. "Your Majesty, forgive me, but you are the Alpha King. Women must throw themselves at you daily." "They do. Then what could you possibly need from me?" For the first time, a flicker of something crossed that frozen face. Something almost like shame. I feel nothing for them, he said, voice low. I feel nothing for anyone. I never have. The confession hung in the air between them. My bloodline carries a curse, Theron continued. The kings of Stormhaven are frozen inside. We cannot feel desire, cannot feel attraction, cannot feel the pull that makes a man pursue a woman or fight for her heart. His jaw tightened. We can perform the motions, speak the words, but there is no warmth behind them, no truth. And every woman who has ever spent time with me has sensed it. Lyra's mind raced. But you are mated. You must have. I am not mated. The words came out sharp. My father died before he could secure my marriage. And now I have until my 30th birthday, 7 months from now, to find a mate and produce an heir. If I fail, the crown passes to my cousin, a man who would destroy everything my family has built. He leaned forward slightly, and Lyra caught a hint of desperation beneath that icy control. I do not need to feel desire, Lady Lyra. I need to fake it convincingly. I need to learn the words that make women feel wanted, the touches that spark attraction, the art of seduction that comes naturally to others but has always been denied to me. Lyra understood now, the pieces clicking into place. You want me to teach you to flirt, yes. To seduce, yes. To make a woman fall in love with you even though you cannot love her back. Something stirred behind his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or resignation. Yes, Lyra should have refused. This was dangerous. A bound witch in the palace of an Alpha King teaching him to manipulate women's hearts. If anyone discovered her identity, her purpose here, she would be executed. And worse, she knew what happened when men fell under her influence. She knew exactly how badly this could end. But then she thought of the alternative. Going back to her father. Being sold at that auction to the merchant with greedy eyes. Spending the rest of her life as a slave or worse. What do I receive in return, she heard herself ask. Theron's eyes met hers. Complete your task successfully. Help me secure a mate before my birthday, and I will unbind your voice, he paused. I will also clear your name of the charges against you and restore your family's honor. Lyra's throat tightened. Her voice, her name, everything that had been stolen from her. You can do that, I am the king. It was not arrogance, simply fact. I can do whatever I wish. She should ask more questions. Should demand guarantees, contracts, witnesses. But the hope blooming in her chest was too powerful to contain. I accept, Theron nodded. Good. We begin tomorrow. Every evening you will come to my private chambers. You will teach me the mechanics of attraction, and I will practice on you until the technique is perfected. Practice on her. The words sent a strange shiver down her spine. I must warn you, Theron added, rising to indicate the meeting was over. I cannot feel anything. Do not expect warmth from me. Do not expect kindness or affection. I am offering you a transaction. Nothing more. Lyra rose as well, steadying herself. I understand, Your Majesty. But as she turned to leave, she saw something that made her pause. His hand resting on the desk was shaking, almost imperceptibly, but shaking nonetheless. For a man who claimed to feel nothing, that seemed like quite a lot of something. She wondered if he was lying, or if he simply did not know himself as well as he believed. The chambers they gave her were finer than anything Lyra had occupied in 3 years. A canopied bed draped in deep blue silk, a fireplace already burning with fragrant applewood, a wardrobe filled with gowns that fit her perfectly, as if someone had known her measurements before she arrived, which she realized someone probably had. The Alpha King did not seem like a man who left things to chance. The servants who attended her were polite, efficient, carefully and curious. They bathed her in rose-scented water, brushed her hair until it gleamed, and dressed her in a simple but elegant gown of deep green. No one asked about the brand on her forehead. No one stared. It was kindness, Lyra realized. Orchestrated, deliberate kindness, and she did not know what to make of it. She had just finished her breakfast the next morning when a knock came at her door. Enter, she whispered, her voice still, that frustrating rasp that was all the binding allowed. The door opened, and Lyra's blood turned to ice. Isolde, her sister, stood in the doorway, beautiful as ever, in a gown of pale rose. Her golden hair was swept up in an elaborate style, and jewels glittered at her throat. She looked every inch the respectable lady she had become, and her eyes were filled with cold fury. So it is true, Isolde said. You are here, in the palace, near the king. Lyra rose slowly, her fingers unsteady. Isolde, I did not expect. What are you doing here? The sister stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Have you not destroyed enough? Must you ruin this family's last chance at respectability? As well, I was hired. The king chose me himself. Chose you. Isolde laughed bitterly. For what? What could you possibly offer that hundreds of other women could not? Lyra hesitated. The truth would only make things worse. I am serving as an etiquette advisor. Nothing more. Etiquette, Isolde's voice dripped with disbelief. You, the woman who seduced my betrothed to madness. I did not. He was obsessed with you. Isolde stepped closer, her voice shaking. Brennan stopped eating, stopped sleeping. He could not think of anything but your voice, your face. And then he walked into the river and drowned himself because he could not have you. The words struck like physical blows. Lyra had heard them before countless times, but they never hurt less. I did not use magic on him, she whispered. My voice was already bound when he... Lies. Isolde's hand shot out and gripped Lyra's wrist painfully. Father saw what you were. Mother saw it too before she died of shame. You are poison, Lyra. Everything you touch, you destroy. Lyra pulled her wrist free, her breath ragged. I came here to rebuild my life, not to harm anyone. If you cannot believe that, then believe this. I will complete my service to the king and then I will leave. You will never see me again. Something shifted in Isolde's eyes, not sympathy, but perhaps a reluctant acceptance. See that you do. Her sister moved toward the door. Because if you bring scandal upon this family again, if you damage my husband's position at court, or put my children's futures at risk, I will personally ensure you are thrown back into that auction hall. Or worse, she left without another word. Lyra stood alone in the beautiful chamber, breathing hard, fighting the tears that burned behind her eyes. Her father, her sister. Everyone who should have loved her believed she was a monster. And perhaps she was. After all, Lord Brennanvale had died. Whatever the truth of how it happened, he had died. And she had been the last person he spoke of before walking into that river. Some stains did not wash clean no matter how hard you scrubbed. That evening, Lyra attended her first court dinner as the king's etiquette advisor. The great hall blazed with candlelight. Long tables groaned under platters of roasted meats, honeyed vegetables, and delicate pastries. Nobles in silks and velvets mingled with foreign dignitaries, their voices creating a constant hum of conversation and laughter. Lyra sat at a lower table deliberately placed far from the king's dais. She was grateful for the anonymity. The fewer people who looked closely at her, the better. But anonymity, it seemed, was not in her future. You there? A woman's voice, sharp and demanding. The advisor. Lyra looked up to find a lady in crimson silk approaching her table. Beautiful, haughty, clearly someone of importance. Lady Morgana, someone murmured nearby. The king's cousin's wife. The king's cousin. The man who would inherit if Theron failed to find a mate. Morgana stopped before Lyra, her eyes sweeping over her with open disdain. So, you are the mysterious woman the king brought from the servants' auction. Her lip curled. How utterly peculiar. Tell me, what exactly do you advise him on? How to select produce? How to scrub floors? Scattered laughter from the nearby nobles. Lyra rose slowly, keeping her expression neutral. I advise His Majesty on matters of etiquette and social custom, my lady. Etiquette? Morgana's eyebrows rose. From a woman who arrived at court in a servant's hood. How delightfully absurd. More laughter. Lyra felt heat climbing her cheeks. Tell me something, Morgana continued, stepping closer. Why do you speak so quietly? Is it an affectation or is there something wrong with your throat? The question was designed to humiliate, to force Lyra to either explain her binding or admit to some other weakness. But before she could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Lady Lyra speaks softly because she understands that true wisdom does not need to shout. The hall went silent. King Theron stood at the edge of the gathering, a goblet of wine in his hand, his pale eyes fixed on Morgana with an expression of absolute cold. In my court, he continued, his voice carrying effortlessly, despite its quietness. We listen carefully when wisdom speaks. Perhaps you might benefit from the practice, Lady Morgana. The noblewoman's face flushed crimson. She opened her mouth, closed it, then dropped into a curtsy so stiff it was nearly an insult. Of course, Your Majesty. Forgive me. Theron's gaze dismissed her without acknowledgement. He turned to the gathered nobles. Lady Lyra is my personal advisor. You will treat her with the same respect you would show any member of my household. Is that understood? Murmured assent rippled through the hall. Theron did not look at Lyra again. He simply returned to his seat on the dais and resumed his conversation with a foreign ambassador as if nothing had happened. But Lyra stood frozen as something warm and unfamiliar blooming in her chest. He had defended her, publicly, against his own cousin's wife. Why, she was nothing to him. A tool, a transaction. He had said so himself, and yet The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. Lyra ate without tasting, spoke when spoken to, without hearing her own words. She was too busy replaying that moment, analyzing it, trying to understand what it meant. When the meal finally ended and she could slip away, she moved quickly through the corridors toward her chambers. She was nearly there when a hand caught her elbow. She spun, her pulse racing. But it was only a servant, a young man with a nervous expression holding out a folded piece of paper. "For you, my lady, delivered just now." He pressed it into her palm and hurried away before she could ask questions. Lyra unfolded the note with unsteady fingers. The handwriting was elegant, formal, and instantly recognizable. "I know what you are. I know what you did. Leave the palace before dawn or I will expose everything to the king. Your loving father." The paper fell from her numb fingers. Her father was here, in the palace, watching her. And if he revealed the truth, if he told the king that she had not merely been bound for her magic but accused of murder, everything would be over. Her chance at freedom, her restored name, her voice, everything. Lyra leaned against the cold stone wall, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She had thought she had escaped him. Thought the auction, the king, this strange new arrangement would finally set her free. But her father had always known how to find her, and he had never, ever let her go. Lyra did not leave before dawn. She sat awake through the night, staring at her father's note, until the words blurred, then burned it in the fireplace and watched the ashes crumble to nothing. Running would confirm her guilt. It would prove everything her father had ever said about her. And more importantly, it would mean surrendering the only chance she might ever have to reclaim her voice, her name, her life. So she stayed. When the summons came that evening, a politely worded request for her presence in the king's private study, Lyra dressed carefully in a gown of midnight blue and made her way through the palace corridors with her chin held high. If her father wanted to destroy her, he would have to do it while she looked him in the eye. The guard outside the study announced her, and Lyra stepped inside. Theron stood by the window as he had the day before, but something was different tonight. His posture was stiffer, his jaw tighter, and when he turned to face her, she noticed the shadows beneath his eyes had deepened. "You came," he said. "Did you expect me not to?" "I expected nothing." He gestured to a chair near the fire. "Sit. We have work to do." Lyra sat arranging her skirts carefully. Her breath was coming too fast, and she forced herself to breathe slowly, evenly. This was a transaction, nothing more. Theron moved to stand before her close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. This near, she could smell him, cedar and frost, an impossible combination that should not have worked together, but somehow did. "Where do we begin?" he asked. Lyra considered the question. She had spent years learning the art of captivation, both through her natural magic and through deliberate study. Breaking it down into teachable components felt almost impossible, but she had to try them. Flirtation, she said, is about attention. Making someone feel like they are the only person in the room, the only person who matters. Theron's expression did not change. "Continue. It starts with eye contact, not staring. That makes people uncomfortable. But looking at someone as if you find them genuinely fascinating, as if you cannot quite believe they exist." She rose from her chair, moving to stand before him at a more equal distance. "Look at me," she instructed. "Not through me, not past me, at me." Theron's pale eyes fixed on hers. The air stilled in Lyra's lungs. There was something unsettling about being the focus of that gaze. It was like standing in the path of an avalanche, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "Good," she managed. "Now soften it slightly. You are not interrogating me. You are appreciating me." His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. The intensity remained, but the edge dulled. His gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then rose again to her eyes. Lyra's cheeks flushed without her permission. "Like that," she whispered. "Yes, exactly like that." Theron tilted his head slightly. "You are blushing. I am demonstrating the effectiveness of the technique." "Are you?" The ghost of something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. It vanished so quickly she almost thought she had imagined it. "What comes next?" he asked. Lyra stepped back, needing the distance. Her pulse raced in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "Touch," she said. "Small touches. Incidental contact that could be accidental but is not. A hand on someone's arm, fingers brushing against fingers. Nothing overt, nothing that could be rejected outright." Theron extended his hand toward her. "Show me." She hesitated. Then slowly she placed her fingers against his forearm. The contact was electric. His skin was cool, unnaturally so, just as it had been in the auction hall. But beneath the coldness she felt something else. A faint tremor. a barely perceptible tension that suggested his control was not as absolute as he pretended. Like this, Lyra said, her voice barely audible. She let her fingers drift upward, tracing the line of his sleeve toward his elbow. Light, brief, leaving them wanting more. Theron's breath hitched. The sound was so small she almost missed it, but she was trained to notice these things. Trained to read the tiny signals that revealed what people truly felt beneath their masks. You felt that, she said. His jaw tightened. I felt your hand on my arm. No, you felt something more. I saw it. For a long moment, he did not respond. Then so softly, she had to lean closer to hear, he said, that is impossible. I told you. I cannot feel. Perhaps you have simply never been taught what to feel for. The words hung between them, dangerous and weighted with implication. Theron stepped back abruptly. That is enough for tonight. Your Majesty, I said enough. His voice was sharper than she had heard it before. Not angry exactly, but rattled, as if she had touched something he had spent years bearing. Lyra knew she should apologize, should retreat, should remember that this man held her future in his hands and could destroy her with a single word. Instead, she asked, why did you defend me tonight at dinner? Against Lady Morgana. Theron froze. You said I am a transaction, Lyra continued, a tool. But tools do not require public defense. They do not require kindness. It was not kindness. Then what was it? He turned to face her, and for just a moment the mask slipped. She saw something raw beneath it, something wounded. I do not know, he admitted, and that disturbs me more than you can possibly understand. He moved to the door and pulled it open. Tomorrow evening, same time, do not be late. Lyra walked past him into the corridor, her thoughts churning. At the doorway she paused. Your Majesty, she whispered. He looked at her. Whatever you believe about yourself, whatever this curse has told you that you are, I do not think you are as frozen as you claim. She did not wait for his response. But as she walked away, she heard the door close behind her with far more force than necessary, and she wondered if she had just made a terrible mistake, or finally cracked the ice around a heart that had been waiting to thaw. The lessons continued. Every evening, Lyra reported to the king's private study. Every evening, they practiced the mechanics of seduction, eye contact, touch, conversation, the art of the meaningful pause. And every evening, something shifted between them. It was subtle at first, a longer glance, a touch that lingered a half-second too long. Questions that strayed from technique into territory that felt dangerously personal. 2 weeks passed. Neither of them mentioned the truth that hung unspoken in the air, the reality they both knew but dared not voice. The fire in Theron's study burned every night, casting shadows across his face that made him look almost human, almost vulnerable. And Lyra found herself watching him when she should have been teaching, noticing the way his jaw tightened when he was frustrated, the way his eyes softened almost imperceptibly when he looked at her. She was falling. She knew it with a certainty that terrified her. Falling for the cold king who could not feel. Falling for the man who had hired her for a transaction and somehow become everything she had never dared to want. And the worst part, the most dangerous part, was that she did not want to be rescued. Tell me about your voice, Theron said one evening. They were seated by the fire, a book on courtship customs open but forgotten between them. Outside, rain drummed against the windows. Inside, the world had narrowed to just the two of them. Lyra looked up, startled. Why do you want to know? Call it curiosity. She studied his face, searching for mockery or manipulation. She found neither, only that same quiet intensity that had begun to haunt her dreams. It was everything she said finally. When I sang, people stopped what they were doing. They forgot to breathe. Some of them wept. I could make someone feel guilt or sorrow or longing with nothing but a melody. Voice magic. Yes, though I never learned to control it properly. My father, she hesitated. He did not approve of magical training. He wanted the gift, but not the discipline that came with it. Theron leaned forward slightly. And the man who died, Lord Brennan Vale, did you use your voice on him? The question should have felt like an accusation. Instead, it felt like an opening. I do not know. Lyra admitted. My voice was already bound when he became fixated on me. My father had it done the day I turned 18. He claimed it was for my own protection. But I think he was afraid of what I might become. So you could not have magically seduced Lord Vale? No. And yet he became obsessed regardless. She looked down at her hands. Some have suggested the binding was incomplete. That traces of magic still leaked through. Others believe I simply drove him mad through ordinary means. And what do you believe? Lyra met his eyes. I believe that sometimes people become fixated on things they cannot have, and sometimes that fixation destroys them regardless of magic. Recognition passed across Theron's expression, or perhaps understanding. Yes, he murmured. I suppose it does. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. Inside, the space between them felt charged electric, as if the storm had followed them indoors. We should practice, Lyra said, rising from her chair. The winter solstice ball is in 2 weeks. You will need to be ready. Theron rose as well, but he did not move toward her. Tonight, I want to try something different. Different how dancing? Lyra blinked. Dancing it is a common element of courtship, is it not? The closeness, the movement, the excuse to hold someone without impropriety. He was not wrong. But the thought of being held by him, moving with him, their bodies pressed close, I am not certain that is wise, she whispered. Why not? Because I am already too aware of you. Because your hands have not left my thoughts since the first time you touched me. Because I am in danger of forgetting that this is a transaction. She did not say any of that. Instead, she said, there is no music. Theron moved to a cabinet in the corner and opened it to reveal a small music box. When he wound it, a delicate melody filled the room. Slow, haunting, beautiful. There is now. He extended his hand. Lyra knew she should refuse, knew that dancing with him in private in firelight to music that sounded like longing given form was a line she should not cross. She took his hand anyway. He drew her close with surprising gentleness. One hand settled at the small of her back. The other clasped her fingers cool and steady. They began to move. Theron was a skilled dancer. She should have expected that from a king trained in every courtly art. But there was something else in the way he moved, a fluidity that belied his rigid public demeanor, a grace that made her feel as if she were floating. You are trembling, he observed. Am I? Yes. His hand pressed more firmly against her back, steadying her. Would because you are holding me like I matter. Because your eyes have not left my face since we started dancing. Because I can feel your heart beating against my chest, and it is racing just as fast as mine. I am cold, she lied. You are a terrible liar. His voice was low, almost amused, and when she looked up at him, she saw something in his expression that had not been there before. Warmth. Faint flickering like a candle flame, struggling to survive in a winter wind, but warm nonetheless. Theron, she whispered, forgetting his title in her shock. He went still. Say that again. Your Majesty, I know my name. Say it again. His voice was rough, almost desperate, and his eyes, those frozen gray eyes, were burning. Theron. She breathed it like a prayer. His hand tightened on her back. His head dipped lower, his forehead nearly touching hers. No one calls me that, he said, barely above a whisper. Not since my mother died. Not ever. Why not? Because it makes me feel something. His breath ghosted across her lips, and I was taught that feeling was weakness. Lyra's chest was tight with emotion. They had stopped dancing. They were simply standing now, pressed together, breathing the same air. Is it? She whispered. Weakness. I thought so. His thumb traced a slow circle against her back. I am no longer certain. The music box wound down its melody, fading into silence. Neither of them moved. I should go, Lyra said. Yes, Theron agreed, but his arms did not release her, and her hands remained pressed against his chest, feeling the steady thunder of his heart. The lessons she managed, they are working. You are learning. I am not learning anything. His voice was raw. I am not practicing technique. I am not preparing for the ball or any other woman. I am falling, Lyra. Despite everything I was told was impossible. Despite the curse that should have frozen me completely. I am falling, and I do not know how to stop. Her breath caught. Before she could respond, before she could process what he had just admitted, he released her and stepped away. Go, he said hoarsely. Now, before I do something we will both regret. Lyra fled. She made it halfway to her chambers before she had to stop, leaning against the cold stone wall, pressing her hand to her racing heart. He was falling for her, and the terrible, wonderful, terrifying truth was that she was falling too. She had been falling since the moment he defended her at dinner, since the moment she had seen that tremor beneath his control, since the moment he looked at her as if she were something precious rather than something broken. What have I done? She whispered to the empty corridor. But she already knew the answer. She had done exactly what she was accused of doing to Lord Brennan Vale. She had made a man fall for her, and this time the man was a king. 3 more days passed. 3 days of lessons that felt more like torture than instruction. Theron did not speak of his confessions again. He did not mention falling. He did not touch her more than the lessons required, but everything had changed. The air between them was charged now electric with unspoken words. Every accidental brush of fingers sent sparks through her nerve endings. Every time their eyes met, she felt as if she were drowning in gray winter seas, and the worst part, the most terrifying part, was that she did not want to be rescued. She found herself watching him when she should have been teaching, noticing the small things, the way his jaw tightened when he was frustrated, the way his eyes softened almost imperceptibly when he looked at her, the way he said her name low and careful as if it were something fragile he was afraid to break. She was in love with him. The realization struck her one evening as she sat alone in her chambers staring at the fire without seeing it. She loved him, the cold king who could not feel, the frozen alpha who had hired her for a transaction and somehow become everything she had never dared to want. And she was going to destroy him because her father was still here, still watching. And the longer she stayed, the greater the danger became. It was on the fourth day after the confession that the danger finally found its form. Lady Lyra. The voice was elderly, female, unfamiliar. Lyra looked up from the herb garden where she had been walking trying to clear her head. An old woman stood on the path before her, small, hunched, with sharp eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "I am Thistle," the woman said. "I served the late queen as her personal witch before the ban. I have been living in hiding ever since, but the old wards I placed on the palace still hold." She moved closer. "They told me something was happening, something dangerous." Lyra's pulse quickened. "Who are you?" I told you. "I am Thistle, and I have been watching you, child." The old woman gestured to a stone bench beneath a flowering tree. "Sit with me. We do not have much time." Lyra sat wary but curious. Thistle lowered herself beside her with a soft groan. "You carry warmth," the witch said. "I can feel it radiating from you." Voice magic. Old magic. The kind that runs deep. She studied Lyra's face. "You are teaching the king to seduce a woman." Lyra's breath caught. "How do you have eyes everywhere, child? And I know what the curse does to the kings of Stormhaven." She paused. "I also know what happens when the curse begins to break." "What do you mean?" Thistle's expression grew grave. "The kings of Stormhaven carry a bloodline curse, placed centuries ago by a scorned witch. They are frozen inside, incapable of feeling love, desire, true connection. It was meant to be a blessing, a way to ensure rulers who would never be swayed by passion or sentiment." "Some blessing," Lyra said bitterly. "Indeed, but the curse has a fail-safe." Thistle leaned closer. "If a king ever manages to feel true love, despite the freezing, if something thaws his heart enough for genuine emotion to take root, the curse activates completely. It freezes him entirely. And he dies." The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. "No, yes," the witch's eyes were sad. "I warned the late queen. I warned the king's father. But they believed love would never find these frozen men, that the curse would hold forever." Lyra's hands were shaking. "Then I must leave." "I must go before what? Before he loves you." Thistle shook her head. "Child, if what I sense is true, it is already too late. The king is falling, perhaps has already fallen. The curse will activate soon, perhaps at the winter solstice ball. Perhaps sooner. Then how do I stop it?" Thistle studied her for a long moment. Voice magic is warmth given form. It carries emotion, passion, the heat of connection between souls. It is the natural opposite of the ice that binds him. She paused. "If a voice witch of sufficient power were to sing to him, truly sing with all the love in her heart, she could melt the curse entirely, break it forever." Hope flared in Lyra's chest, then died just as quickly. "My voice is bound. Then you must unbind it. I do not know how. The seal, my father holds the seal. He would never then take it from him." Lyra stared at the old witch. "You are asking me to—" "I am asking you to save the man you love." Thistle's voice was gentle but firm. "The winter solstice ball is in 2 weeks. Court expects the king to choose a mate publicly. Your father will strike then. I can feel it. The threads of fate are converging. How do you know what my father will do? Because I know what men like him do when their power is threatened. And you, child, are the greatest threat he has ever faced." The old witch rose, joints creaking. "Be ready," she said. "When the curse activates, you will have only hours, perhaps less. And if you fail," she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Thistle walked away, disappearing into the garden's deeper shadows as if she had never been there at all. Lyra sat alone on the bench, staring at her hands. 2 weeks. 2 weeks until everything fell apart. Unless she could find a way to break the curse first. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of preparation and growing dread. The palace hummed with activity as servants readied the great hall for the winter solstice ball. Garlands of evergreen, ice sculptures, enough candles to turn night into day. And everywhere Lyra went, she felt eyes watching her. The council summoned Theron twice in 1 week. Lyra was not present, but she heard the whispers. The advisors were pressuring him. The kingdom needed stability, an heir, a queen from a powerful family with useful alliances. Lady Seraphine of Ironhold, they said. Beautiful, educated, from a bloodline almost as old as the king's own. The perfect choice. If only the king would stop wasting time with his etiquette advisor and make a decision. Theron told Lyra about it one evening, his voice tight with frustration. They want me to choose Lady Seraphine, he said. They have arranged for her to attend the ball, to be seated beside me at dinner, to dance the opening waltz. He stood by the window, his back to her shoulders, rigid. And what did you tell them? Lyra asked, though she was not certain she wanted to know the answer. I told them I would consider it. The words should not have hurt. This was the plan after all. He was supposed to choose someone appropriate, someone who could give him an heir and secure his throne, someone who was not her. But the pain was sharp and immediate nonetheless. I see, she managed. Theron turned to face her. What do you want me to say? Your Majesty? The formal title hung between them like a wall. I want... He stopped, shook his head. It does not matter what I want. Does it not? No, his voice was bitter. I am the king. I do not have the luxury of wanting. Lyra stood, her hands clenched at her sides. Then why did you hire me? Why waste weeks teaching you to seduce a woman if you were simply going to choose whoever your council selected because I thought it would work? He moved toward her, each step deliberate. I thought I could learn the words, the gestures, the mechanics of attraction. I thought I could perform them for Lady Seraphine or any other suitable candidate, and they would believe it. But I cannot. Why not? Because the techniques only work when I am with you. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the tension in his jaw. I have tried, Lyra. For 2 weeks I have tried to imagine speaking those words to someone else, touching someone else, looking at someone else the way I look at you. But when I do, the words turn to ash in my mouth, my hands go cold. Everything inside me freezes solid again. He paused. You are the only one who makes me feel, the only one who ever has. Then do not choose Lady Seraphine. I have no choice. You are the king. You can do whatever you wish. You told me so yourself, not in this. His voice was raw. If I do not secure an alliance, if I do not produce an heir, my cousin will destroy everything. The reforms my father worked for, the peace we have built. He will tear it all down and rebuild the kingdom in his image. Brutal, tyrannical. I cannot allow that, even if it costs you everything. Even then. Lyra felt tears burning behind her eyes. Then what was the point of all this? The lessons, the confession, There was no point. Theron's hand lifted as if to touch her face, then fell. I was a fool to think I could feel and still remain king. I was a fool to think the curse could be beaten by wanting something badly enough. He turned away. The ball is in 1 week. You should attend, to observe, to ensure I do not make errors when I dance with Lady Seraphine. The words were a knife to her heart, and after Lyra whispered, after you choose her, after you will have fulfilled your contract, I will unbind your voice, clear your name, restore your family's honor, and you will be free to go. Free. The word tasted like poison. Lyra walked to the door. Her hand rested on the handle for a long moment. Your Majesty, she said without turning around. Yes, I hope Lady Seraphine makes you happy. She left before he could respond. But as she walked away, she heard something crash against the far wall of the study. The sound of wood splintering. A wordless roar of frustration that followed her all the way back to her chambers. And she knew. He was not any more resigned to this fate than she was. But neither of them knew how to escape it. The winter solstice ball arrived with the weight of an execution. Lyra dressed in the gown the servants had prepared for her, ice blue silk with silver embroidery that caught the light like frost. Her dark hair was swept up, leaving her neck bare. The brand on her forehead had faded slightly over the weeks, but it was still visible, still a reminder of what she was, what she had been accused of being. She made her way to the great hall as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Inside, the palace blazed with light, hundreds of candles, crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures carved into the shapes of wolves and eagles and ancient trees. It was beautiful. It felt like a funeral. The hall filled quickly, nobles in their finest silks and velvets, foreign dignitaries with jewels glittering at their throats. And at the center of it all, seated on the dais, King Throne. He wore black, unrelieved austere black that made his pale skin seem even more bloodless. His dark hair was swept back from his face. His expression was carved from stone. And beside him in a chair that had been placed deliberately close sat Lady Seraphine of Ironhold. She was beautiful. Lyra could admit that even through the jealousy that clawed at her chest. Golden hair, perfect features, a gown of deep emerald that complemented her coloring perfectly. She leaned toward Theron, speaking softly, her hand resting on the arm of his chair. He did not look at her. His eyes swept the crowd, searching until they found Lyra, standing near the back of the hall. For one moment, their gazes locked. And in that moment, Lyra saw everything he could not say. The longing, the frustration, the resignation. Then Lady Seraphine touched his arm, drawing his attention back, and the moment shattered. The orchestra began to play. The ball had officially begun. Lyra watched as Theron rose and offered his hand to Lady Seraphine, watched as they descended from the dais together and moved to the center of the dance floor, watched as the crowd parted to give them space. The opening waltz, a tradition. The king dancing with the woman he intended to choose. They began to move. And Lyra watched her heart break in real time. Theron was technically proficient, every step perfect, every turn precise. But there was no warmth in it, no life. He held Lady Seraphine as if she were made of glass he was afraid to break, or perhaps as if she were a stranger he had been forced to touch. Lady Seraphine did not seem to notice. She smiled up at him, speaking words Lyra could not hear, laughing at something, touching his shoulder with practiced ease. But Theron's expression never changed. Cold, distant, frozen. The dance ended. Polite applause rippled through the hall. Theron escorted Lady Seraphine back to the dais, bowed formally, and turned away. Other couples moved onto the dance floor. The ball continued, but Theron did not dance again. He stood beside his chair, hands clasped behind his back, watching the crowd with those empty gray eyes. Several women approached him, ladies in beautiful gowns who smiled and curtsied and clearly hoped for an invitation. He refused them all with the same cold politeness. "I do not dance tonight." Lyra could not watch anymore. She turned to leave, to escape to the gardens where she could breathe, where she could cry without an audience. A hand caught her wrist. She spun. Theron stood behind her, his chest rising and falling, as if he had run across the entire hall to reach her. "Your Majesty," she breathed. "You should not dance with me." "What? Dance with me, Lyra?" His voice was desperate, raw. Nothing like the cold king who had just waltzed with Lady Seraphine. "Everyone will see," she whispered. "Good. Let them." He drew her toward the dance floor. She should have pulled away, should have reminded him that this was madness, that he was supposed to be courting Lady Seraphine, that she was nothing, no one, a bound witch who would only bring him scandal. But his hand was warm in hers, and she was so tired of being cold. They reached the center of the floor. The orchestra, seeing the king had returned, began a new waltz. Slower this time, more intimate. Theron pulled her close, one hand at the small of her back, the other clasping her fingers. And this time there was warmth. There was life. There was everything he had been unable to give Lady Seraphine. They began to move, and the difference was stark, immediate, undeniable. This was not technical proficiency. This was connection. This was two people moving as one, as if they had danced together 1,000 times before, as if their bodies knew each other in ways that transcended words. The crowd went silent, watching, whispering. "Let them watch," Theron murmured. "Let them whisper. I am done pretending. Theron, I have tried," he said, his voice low and fierce. "For weeks I have tried to make these techniques work on anyone else. But they do not. The words are empty. The touches are cold. I feel nothing." His hand tightened on her back. "You are the only one who makes me feel, Lyra. The only one who ever has. And if I must choose tonight, choose you." The words were everything she had wanted to hear, and everything she feared. Because she knew what came next. The doors at the far end of the hall slammed open. Lord Corbin Ashwood strode through them, his face purple with rage, guards scrambling to stop him. "Your Majesty," he roared, "I demand an audience." The music stopped. The dancing stopped. Every eye in the hall turned toward the interruption. Theron's arms fell away from Lyra. His expression shifted back into cold stone. "Lord Ashwood," he said, voice carrying across the sudden silence. "This is hardly the time. That woman is a criminal." Corbin pointed at Lyra, his hands shaking. A murderer! And I have proof, the crowd gasped. Murmurs erupted like wildfire. Lyra stood frozen, her worst nightmare unfolding before her. Her father had struck. And now there was nowhere left to run. The throne room the next morning was cold despite the fire burning in the massive hearth. Lyra stood alone on the marble floor, her hands clasped before her, trying to keep them from shaking. Around her, the space felt vast and empty, accusatory. The carved stone columns rose toward vaulted ceilings lost in shadow. Tapestries depicting ancient battles hung along the walls, warriors frozen in eternal combat. Fitting, she thought bitterly. Everything in this palace was frozen. Guards lined the perimeter, their faces impassive beneath silver helms. Courtiers filled the galleries above their whispers, creating a constant hum like distant insects. At the far end of the room, on a raised dais, sat King Theron. His face was carved from stone, his eyes shapes of winter ice. He wore the full regalia of his office. Crown, ceremonial robes, the weight of 5 kingdoms on his shoulders. He looked nothing like the man who had held her on the dance floor last night. Nothing like the man who had whispered that he chose her. To his right stood the chief advisor, an elderly man with shrewd eyes. To his left stood Lord Corbin Ashwood, her father. Dressed in formal robes, his silver hair swept back from a face that wore righteousness like a mask. Lyra had not seen him this close in 3 years. She had forgotten how cold his eyes were, how cruel the set of his mouth. Looking at him now, she could not understand how she had ever believed he loved her, how she had ever called him father. The chief advisor stepped forward, his voice carrying through the vast chamber. We are gathered to address the allegations made by Lord Corbin Ashwood of Ravenwood against Lady Lyra Ashwood, formerly of the same estate. The charges are as follows. First, the seduction and murder of Lord Brennan Vale through magical means. Second, the deception of His Majesty the King regarding her criminal past. Third, the practice of forbidden voice magic within the palace walls despite her binding. Each word fell like a stone into still water, sending ripples of shock through the galleries. Lord Ashwood, the advisor, continued, you may present your case. Corbin stepped forward, and Lyra saw the performance in every movement. The careful concern, the pained reluctance. The loving father forced to expose his daughter's sins for the good of the kingdom. It sickened her. Your Majesty, Corbin began, his voice heavy with manufactured sorrow. It pains me beyond measure to stand before you today, but I cannot in good conscience allow this deception to continue. My daughter, he paused as if the words were difficult. My daughter is not merely a bound voice witch. She is a murderer. The galleries erupted. Guards called for silence. It took several minutes for order to be restored. Corbin continued as if there had been no interruption. Lord Brennan Vale was betrothed to my younger daughter, Isolde. He was kind, honorable, destined for greatness. A match that would have elevated our family and secured our future. But then my eldest daughter set her sights on him. That is not true, Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. Silence, the chief advisor commanded. You will have your chance to speak. Corbin's eyes glittered with satisfaction. She seduced him, he said, his voice rising, used her voice magic to cloud his mind, to make him obsessed with her. When he tried to resist, tried to honor his commitment to Isolde, she drove him to madness. Lord Vale walked into the river and drowned himself because he could not live with wanting her and not having her. My magic was already bound, Lyra whispered. You bound it yourself. I could not have. The binding was incomplete. Corbin's voice cracked like a whip. That is what the witch who performed it told me afterward. Traces of your power remained. Enough to destroy a good man's mind. Enough to kill him. Lyra felt the floor tilt beneath her. The binding. Incomplete. All these years she had told herself she was innocent. That she could not have magically seduced Lord Brennan because her voice had been silenced. But if traces had remained, if some fragment of her power had leaked through, despite everything, is this true? Theron's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. She looked up at him, at those pale eyes that had grown so much warmer over the past weeks, and felt her heart shatter. I do not know, she admitted. I never learned to control my magic. If traces remained, I would not have known I was using them. She admits it, Corbin said triumphantly. Your Majesty, this woman is a danger to everyone around her. She must be removed from the palace immediately. Better yet, she should be imprisoned until a proper trial can be enough. The single word silenced the room. Theron rose from his throne. In the candlelight, his face was hard as granite, his eyes chips of winter ice. But when he spoke, it was not to Corbin. Lady Lyra, he said softly, look at me. She raised her eyes to his. Did you intend to harm Lord Brennan Vale number? Did you deliberately use magic to seduce him? I swear it. Do you believe in your heart that you were responsible for his death? The question pierced straight through her defenses. For 3 years, she had asked herself the same thing. For 3 years, she had never been able to answer with certainty. But standing here under Theron's steady gaze, she finally knew. No, she whispered. I do not believe I killed him. I was angry at him for choosing my sister. I was hurt. But I would never have wanted him dead. Theron nodded slowly. Then he turned to Corbin. Lord Ashwood, your allegations are noted. They will be investigated thoroughly. But until evidence is produced beyond your own testimony, Lady Lyra remains under my protection. Your Majesty, you cannot, Corbin sputtered. You are dismissed. The words were final. Absolute. The command of a king who would not be argued with. Corbin's face purpled with rage. But even he could not argue with a direct command from the Alpha King. He bowed stiffly, the movement more insult than respect, and swept from the throne room. His robes snapped behind him like a banner of war. The moment the doors closed, Lyra's legs gave out. She would have fallen, but Theron was there, moving faster than she had ever seen him move, catching her before she hit the marble floor. I have you, he said gently. I have you. She clung to him, shaking, unable to speak, unable to think. Why she finally managed. Why do you believe me? My own family thinks I am a monster. Theron's arms tightened around her. Because I know what it is to be accused of coldness. You did not choose, he said. Because I have watched you for weeks and I know the shape of your heart. And because he stopped. Because what Lyra whispered. Because I love you. The words fell between them like stones into still water. Lyra pulled back, staring up at him. What did you say, I love you? His voice was raw. I did not think it possible. I was told it was impossible. But you have undone every certainty I ever had about myself, and I cannot pretend otherwise any longer. Joy flooded through her, bright and overwhelming. I love you too, she breathed. I have been falling for weeks. I was afraid to tell you. Afraid of what it might mean. Afraid that she never finished the sentence. Because he kissed her. It was nothing like the careful touches of their lessons. This was desperate. Consuming. A man drowning and finally finding air. His hands tangled in her hair. His lips moved against hers with a hunger that stole her breath. And she kissed him back with equal ferocity, pouring 3 years of loneliness into it. 3 years of believing she was unworthy of love. 3 years of thinking she was poison. For one perfect, shimmering moment, the world was right. Then Theron gasped. He wrenched away from her, his hand flying to his chest. His face had gone white. Not pale, but white. The color of fresh snow. Theron Lyra reached for him. What is wrong? He stumbled backward, his breathing ragged. No, he gasped. No, this cannot. Lyra watched in horror as frost began to spread across his chest, visible even through his shirt. It climbed up his neck, crystallized along his jaw, crept toward his eyes like living crystal. The curse he choked out. I should have told you. If I ever truly fell in love, if I ever let myself feel, what happens? Lyra demanded, grabbing his arms. His skin was freezing. Theron, what happens? He looked at her with eyes that were already glazing with frost. I die. Then he collapsed, and Lyra screamed, Help, someone help me. Her voice tore from her throat louder than it had been in 3 years. The binding flared with white-hot pain, but she did not care. She was on her knees beside Theron, her hands pressing against his chest, feeling the unnatural cold spreading beneath her palms. Guards burst through the doors. Servants followed. Within moments, the throne room was chaos. The king has collapsed. Send for the healers. What happened to him? Stand back, everyone. Stand back. An elderly woman pushed through the crowd, her robes marking her as the palace's chief healer. She knelt beside Theron, her hands moving over his body with practiced efficiency. Then she went still. This is not illness, she said, voice low. This is magic. Old magic. I cannot treat this. Then find someone who can, Lyra demanded. There must be witches. Practitioners. Someone. Voice witches are banned from the capital, a guard said. By order of the late king. Then send outside the capital. Send anywhere. Do something. The healer looked at her with sorrowful eyes. My lady, even if we found a witch powerful enough, the king has hours at most. The ice has already reached his heart. Hours. Lyra looked down at Theron's face. His lips were blue. Frost crystals had formed on his eyelashes. He looked like a statue carved from winter itself. Beautiful and cold and utterly still. There must be a way, she whispered. There must be. There is. The voice came from the doorway. Lyra turned to find Thistle standing there. Small, hunched, with sharp eyes that seemed to see straight through the chaos to the heart of what mattered. "Who are you?" the chief healer demanded. "My name is Thistle," the old woman said, moving into the room with surprising speed. "I served the king's grandmother as her personal witch before the ban. I have been living in hiding ever since, but the old wards I placed on the palace still hold. They told me the curse had finally awakened." She knelt beside Theron, her gnarled hands hovering over his chest. "I warned them this would happen. I warned them all. Warned them about what Lyra asked." The cursed Thistle's eyes met hers. "The kings of Stormhaven carry a bloodline curse placed centuries ago by a scorned witch. They are frozen inside, incapable of feeling love, desire, true connection. It was meant to be a blessing, a way to ensure rulers who would never be swayed by passion or sentiment." "Some blessing," Lyra said bitterly. "Indeed, but the curse has a failsafe. If a king ever manages to feel true love, despite the freezing, if something thaws his heart enough for genuine emotion to take root, the curse activates completely. It freezes him entirely, and he dies." Lyra's hands tightened on Theron's frozen fingers. "Then how do I stop it?" Thistle studied her for a long moment. "You are the voice witch, the one he hired to teach him seduction." "Yes, and you love him." It was not a question. "Yes," Lyra whispered, "I love him." Thistle nodded slowly. "Voice magic is warmth given form. It carries emotion, passion, the heat of connection between souls. It is the natural opposite of the ice that binds him." She paused. If a voice witch of sufficient power were to sing to him, truly sing, with all the love in her heart, she could melt the curse entirely. Hope flared in Lyra's chest, then died just as quickly. "My voice is bound," she said. "I cannot sing. I can barely speak above a whisper." "Then you must unbind it. I do not know how." "The seal. My father holds the seal." "He would never then take it from him." Lyra stared at the old witch. "You are the only one who can save him," Thistle said softly. "The only one whose voice carries enough love to reach through the ice. But you must act quickly. By dawn, it will be too late." By dawn. She had hours, mere hours, to confront her father, retrieve the seal, break a binding that had held for 3 years, and somehow learn to use magic she had never been taught to control. It was impossible. But Theron was dying, and impossible had stopped meaning anything the moment she realized she loved him. Lyra rose to her feet. "Take care of him," she said to Thistle. "Keep him alive as long as you can." "Where are you going?" the healer asked. Lyra was already moving toward the door. "To get my voice back." The ride through the darkened streets of the capital felt endless. Lyra had commandeered a horse from the royal stables, ignoring the protests of the grooms. She rode hard through empty avenues, past shuttered shops and sleeping houses, toward the district where noble visitors kept their townhomes. Her father would be there. He always stayed at the same residence when he visited the capital. The Ashwood family's ancestral property, a cold stone building that matched his cold stone heart. She arrived as the clock tower struck midnight. 12 hours until dawn. 12 hours to save Theron. Lyra dismounted and strode toward the door. A servant tried to block her entry. "Lady Lyra, your father has retired for the..." She pushed past him. The townhouse was dark except for a single light burning in the study. Lyra followed it, her boots echoing on marble floors, her pulse pounding against her ribs. She found her father exactly where she expected. Seated behind his desk, a glass of wine in his hand, as if he had been waiting for her. "Ah," Lord Corbin said pleasantly. "I wondered how long it would take. Give me the seal." No pleasantries, no pretense of filial affection. Corbin took a sip of wine. "I raised you better than this, Lyra. You did not raise me at all. You imprisoned me, bound me, branded me, and then you sold me at auction like livestock. For your own good. Give me the seal." Her voice cracked, the binding flaring with pain. "The king is dying. My voice can save him. Give me the seal, and I will leave Stormhaven forever. You will never have to see me again." Her father set down his wineglass. "No." "Father," I said no. He rose from his chair. In the candlelight, his face looked almost demonic. "You think I do not know what you have been doing in that palace? You think I do not have eyes everywhere? You seduced the king himself, Lyra. Just as you seduced Brennan Vale. Just as you destroy everything you touch. I did not seduce anyone. I cannot. My voice is bound." "Is it?" Her father's smile was cruel. "Tell me, daughter. Did you never wonder why the binding was incomplete? Why traces of your power remained, despite everything I paid to have it sealed away?" Lyra's blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" Left the cracks deliberately. Her father moved closer, close enough that she could smell the wine on his breath. Enough to ensure that any man who fell for you would seem enchanted. Enough to guarantee that when something went wrong, and something always goes wrong around you, there would be someone to blame. You framed me. The words came out hollow. You made sure I would be blamed for anything that happened. And then she stopped. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. You killed him, she breathed. You killed Brennan Vale. Her father's expression did not change. He was unsuitable, Lord Corbin said, as casually as if discussing the weather. A minor lord with no fortune and romantic notions above his station. Isolde deserved better. Deserved. So you murdered him. Your own daughter's betrothed. I drove him mad. A few whispered words in the night, a few suggestions planted while he slept. It took less than a week before he walked into that river. Lyra felt sick. You have voice magic, she realized. That is how the inheritance it came from my mother. Her father's lip curled. A witch who seduced my father into marriage and contaminated our bloodline with her filth. I discovered my own abilities young, and I learned to hide them, to suppress them, to ensure no one would ever know. But you manifested. His voice dripped with hatred. My greatest shame made flesh, a constant reminder of what I truly am. When Brennan Vale discovered my secret, when he threatened to expose our family's magical heritage, I had no choice. You murdered him, blamed me, destroyed my life to protect yourself. I did what was necessary. A sob tore from Lyra's throat, not of grief but of rage. 3 years. 3 years of believing she might be a monster. 3 years of guilt and shame and isolation. All because her father was too cowardly to face what he was. Give me the seal, she said, or I will take it from your corpse. Her father laughed. You cannot hurt me, Lyra. You have no power, no voice, no, she has me. They both spun toward the doorway. Isolde stood there still in her nightcloak, her face pale with horror. Isolde, their father said sharply, go back to bed. You killed him. Isolde's voice shook. You killed Brennan. I heard everything. You heard nothing. You misunderstood. I heard you confess to murder. Isolde screamed. I heard you admit to driving him mad, to framing Lyra, to... She choked on a sob. He was going to marry me. I loved him, and you murdered him because he knew your secret. Isolde, where is the seal? The father's voice turned dangerous. I will not. Isolde moved faster than Lyra would have believed possible. She crossed the room in 3 strides, seized a heavy candlestick from the mantel, and swung it at their father's head. The crack of impact echoed through the study. Lord Corbin crumpled to the floor. Silence. The sisters stared at each other across their father's unconscious body. The desk Isolde whispered, her voice unsteady. He keeps important things in the locked drawer. Lyra moved. Her hands shook as she searched the drawers, finally finding a small iron box with a rusted lock. She broke it open with a letter opener. Inside, wrapped in velvet, was a small glass vial containing what looked like frozen silver. The seal. Go, Isolde said. Save your king. Lyra looked at her sister. This woman who had hated her for 3 years, who had believed her a murderer, who had just knocked their father unconscious to help her. Isolde, we will talk later. Tears streamed down Isolde's face. After you save him, after you fix what father broke. We will talk, and I will apologize for every cruel word I ever said to you. She managed a watery smile. But right now you need to go. Lyra clutched the seal to her chest and ran. Dawn was 2 hours away when Lyra burst through the doors of the throne room. Theron lay on a makeshift bed of cloaks and cushions surrounded by candles that did nothing to warm him. The frost had spread further, covering his entire torso now, creeping up his neck toward his face. His breathing was so shallow she could barely see his chest move. Thistle looked up as she entered. You have it. Lyra held out the vial with unsteady fingers. How do I break it? The old witch took the seal and examined it carefully. This is blood magic, tied to your father's bloodline. She looked at Lyra. You will need to break it with your own blood. Tell me how. Thistle produced a small silver knife. A drop of your blood on the seal. Then speak your true name. Not the name you were given, but the name your soul carries. The one that defines who you truly are. Lyra took the knife. Her hands were steady now. The fear had burned away, leaving only determination. She pricked her finger and let a single drop of blood fall onto the vial. The silver liquid inside began to swirl. Now, Thistle said, your true name. Lyra closed her eyes. Who was she? Not Lady Lyra of Ravenwood. That title had been stripped away long ago. Not the bound witch. The accused murderer. The disgraced daughter. Those were names others had given her. Labels meant to diminish and control. Who was she really? She thought of her voice, the gift that had been her glory and her curse, the power to move hearts, to bring tears, to make people feel things they had forgotten they could feel. She thought of Theron, the way he looked at her as if she were sunrise after an endless night, the way he had defended her, trusted her, loved her despite everything. She thought of the woman she wanted to become, strong, free, unashamed, and she knew. Songbringer, she said. The vial shattered. Power flooded through her like a river breaking through a dam. Her throat burned, then cooled, then burned again. She gasped, staggering as 3 years of suppressed magic roared back to life. Her voice. She could feel it now. Not just sound, but warmth, light, love given form. Sing, Thistle urged. Before it is too late, sing to him. Lyra dropped to her knees beside Theron. She took his frozen hand in hers, brought it to her lips, and began to sing. The melody came from somewhere deeper than memory. It was the song her mother had sung to her as a child, a lullaby about spring returning after winter, about ice melting into streams, about warmth finding its way back to frozen hearts. But as she sang, the song became something more. It became her love for him, every moment they had shared, every touch, every glance, every word spoken in firelight, the way he had chosen her when no one else would, the way he had defended her honor, the way he had trembled beneath her fingers despite claiming to feel nothing. She sang of all of it, and the ice began to melt. Slowly at first, a single drop running down his cheek like a tear, then faster. The frost on his chest dissolved into water. The blue faded from his lips. Color returned to his skin. Lyra sang until her throat ached. Sang until tears streamed down her face. Sang until the last trace of ice had vanished and Theron lay before her, pale but breathing. Alive. His eyes opened. Gray eyes, no longer frozen. Gray eyes filled with something warm and wondering and impossibly tender. Lyra, he breathed. She collapsed against his chest, sobbing. You were dying. I thought I would lose you. I could not. His arms came around her, drawing her near. His skin was warm now. Not the unnatural cold she had grown accustomed to, but warm like any other man's. Warm like he was finally truly alive. You saved me, he said. I love you. The words poured out between sobs. I love you so much. I could not let you die. I could not. He kissed her. It was different from their first kiss. Softer, slower, tasting of tears and relief and a joy so overwhelming it hurt. His hands cupped her face as if she were something precious. His lips moved against hers with all the warmth he had spent a lifetime being denied. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Theron pressed his forehead against hers. The curse, he said gently. Is it broken? Thistle confirmed from somewhere nearby. Completely and utterly broken. Not just for you, your majesty, but for your entire bloodline. Any children you have will be free of it. Children. Lyra's chest tightened with emotion. We will have children, she whispered. Children who can feel. Children who will know love. Theron's smile was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Yes, he said, we will. 1 week later, the grand hall was transformed into a courtroom. Hundreds of nobles filled the tiered seating, galleries packed with witnesses. At the far end, on the raised dais, sat King Theron, not as defendant, but as presiding monarch. And beside him in a chair that had been placed at his right hand sat Lyra, an unprecedented position for an advisor. But then she was no longer just an advisor. Lord Corbin Ashwood stood in chains before the dais. His face was bruised from where Isolde had struck him. His fine robes had been replaced with prisoner's gray, but his eyes still burned with hatred. The royal prosecutor stepped forward. Lord Corbin Ashwood of Ravenwood, you stand accused of 3 crimes. First, the murder of Lord Brennan Vale through magical manipulation. Second, the false imprisonment and defamation of your daughter, Lady Lyra Ashwood. Third, the deliberate sabotage of a magical binding to frame an innocent woman. How do you plead? Corbin's jaw tightened. Not guilty. Then we shall hear the evidence. The first witness was called. Isolde Ashwood walked to the center of the hall. She wore mourning gray, her face pale but composed. When she spoke, her voice was clear. I am Isolde Ashwood, younger daughter of the accused. Lord Brennan Vale was my betrothed. We were to be married in the spring. She paused, gathering strength. 1 week ago, I overheard my father confess to his murder. He said, and I quote, I drove Brennan mad. A few whispered words in the night, a few suggestions planted while he slept. It took less than a week before he walked into that river. Gasps erupted from the galleries. My father also admitted to possessing voice magic, which he has hidden his entire life. He admitted to deliberately leaving my sister's magical binding incomplete so that if anything went wrong, she could be blamed. Isolde's voice broke. I loved Brennan Vale. I have spent 3 years believing my sister killed him. I was wrong. My father is the murderer, and I will carry the shame of my accusations against Lyra for the rest of my life. She stepped down. The second witness was Thistle. The old witch presented the binding contract pointing out the specific clause where Corbin had requested incomplete sealing. She presented magical residue samples, documentation signed in Corbin's own hand. This was not protective binding, Thistle said. This was sabotage. The third witness was the head housekeeper from the Ashwood estate. I saw Lord Corbin entering Lord Vale's chambers late at night, she testified. Multiple times in the week before Lord Vale's death. He said he was counseling the young lord. But Lord Vale grew worse each night. The nightmares, the voices he said he heard. The valet who had served Brennan testified next. Lord Vale spoke of hearing whispers, commands, telling him to seek Lady Lyra, that she was his true destiny. But Lady Lyra had already been sent away. Lord Vale became despondent. Then the man broke down, unable to continue. The evidence mounted, witness after witness, document after document. The case was airtight. Lord Corbin tried one last desperate gambit. He began to whisper. It started as a low hum beneath the testimony, words too soft to distinguish, but carrying power nonetheless. Voice magic leaking out in tendrils of cold manipulation. The crowd began to murmur, to shift uneasily. Some looked confused, as if fighting against thoughts that were not their own. Lyra stood. She opened her mouth and sang. A single pure note, it cut through Corbin's whispers like sunlight through fog. Warmth flooded the hall. The cold manipulation shattered like glass. Corbin gasped, his magic collapsing. Lyra held the note for another moment, then let it fade. You taught me that magic could be a weapon, she said quietly. But mine is different. Mine is truth. Silence filled the hall. Then Theron spoke. Lord Corbin Ashwood, you are found guilty on all charges. His voice was iron. For the murder of Lord Brennan Vale, life imprisonment. For the crimes against your daughter, forfeiture of all titles and lands. The Ashwood estate will pass to Lady Isolde Ashwood. Your name will be stricken from the noble records. You will be remembered only as the man who wielded magic for murder and cowardice. Guards moved forward to drag Corbin away. He fought screaming denials. Screaming that Lyra was the monster, that she had seduced them all. No one listened. In the galleries above, Lady Morgana sat stone-faced beside her husband. The cousin who would have inherited had Theron failed. Their faces revealed nothing, but when the guards escorted Corbin past them, neither met his eyes. Within a week, they would retire to their country estate, gracious in defeat, or perhaps simply wise enough to know when a battle was lost. When the doors finally closed behind Corbin, the hall erupted in applause. Theron raised his hand for silence. Lady Lyra Ashwood is hereby cleared of all accusations. Her name is restored. Her honor is beyond question. He stood and extended his hand to her. And I ask her now, before all witnesses, to accept my hand as Queen of Stormhaven. Lyra's vision blurred with tears. Yes, she whispered, 1,000 times yes. Theron kissed her before the entire court. And this time when the crowd cheered, it was with genuine joy. Lady Seraphine rose from her seat in the gallery, her face carefully blank, and swept from the hall without a backward glance. Her exit was quiet, dignified. The closing of a door that had never truly opened. They married quietly 1 month after the trial. No grand ceremony, just Theron and Lyra in the palace chapel at dawn, with Thistle and Isolde as witnesses. Lyra wore pale blue. Theron smiled, truly smiled, when she walked toward him. And when he kissed her as husband and wife, there was no ice, only warmth. 2 months later, spring began to touch the mountains. Lyra stood in the courtyard of the newly built Stormhaven Academy of Vocal Arts, watching as workers placed the final stones. The building was beautiful, all arched windows and carved pillars, a place designed for warmth and light and voices raised in song. Behind her, Theron wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. They registered 127 witches in the first month, he murmured. Thistle says we may need to expand the building by autumn. Good, Lyra said. She placed her hands over his, feeling the warmth of his skin. 8 months ago, he had been frozen. 8 months ago, she had been silenced. Now they were both free. Theron's 30th birthday had come and gone 3 weeks prior. The curse broken the succession, secured the council, had finally stopped their anxious hovering. In the distance, she could hear young witches practicing scales. hesitant at first, then growing bolder. Voices that had been hidden for years finally given permission to sing. It was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. "How are you feeling?" Theron asked, his hand drifting to her stomach. Lyra smiled. She was 4 months along now. The pregnancy had been confirmed 1 month after the trial, a child conceived on the night the curse broke in love and desperation and hope. A child who would never know the curse that had frozen the kings of Stormhaven for generations. "I feel warm," she said. Theron laughed, the sound rich and full, and so different from the cold silence he had carried when they met. "Come," he said. "The council is waiting. We have reforms to approve." They walked back toward the palace hand in hand. Behind them, the academy gleamed in the afternoon sun. Ahead of them, the future stretched bright and uncertain, and theirs. That evening, they stood together on their private balcony, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The city spread below them, lights beginning to glow as darkness fell. In the distance, they could see the academy, its windows warm with candlelight as students practiced into the evening. "Do you have regrets?" Theron asked. "About how we began?" Lyra leaned into him. "You mean being bought at auction by a king who hired me to teach him to flirt?" Theron laughed. "When you put it that way." "No regrets," Lyra said. "Every moment let us hear." She turned in his arms to face him. "You gave me my voice back. You gave me my name. You gave me a future. You gave me everything," Theron said. "The ability to feel, to love, to be something more than ice and duty." "We saved each other," Lyra whispered. "We did." He kissed her as the last light faded from the sky. And somewhere in the city below, a young voice witch sang her first free note, the sound rising pure and clear into the gathering darkness. Spring had come to Stormhaven, and it would never be winter again.